Shalom and welcome to tonight's discussion. My name is Adiel and I will be your host. I want to first thank everyone who's watching and also thank those who were present for our Feast of Tabernacles celebration. Both those who were present in person as well as those who were present over the air. So tonight's discussion will be a little bit more casual than our previous discussion, and our key scripture for tonight will be Revelations chapter 3, verse 18. So let's go ahead and get this underway. Tonight's class will be a quick one. Revelations chapter 3, verse 18, it reads, I counsel thee to buy of me gold tried in the fire, that thou mayest be rich, and white raiment, that thou mayest be clothed, and that the shame of thy nakedness do not appear, and anoint thine eyes with eye salve, that thou mayest see. Okay, so we see three things here that we're being counseled to obtain: gold, white raiments, and eye salve. Now, all three of these things are directly or indirectly related to multiple end times prophecies. And being that I'm a firm believer that we are in those times, it's important that we kind of get this out of the way. You've heard us talk about this scripture in the past as a means to urge you to obtain silver and gold, and we are still urging you to obtain it. We're going to go into a little more detail about that on both levels, because it's important for us to understand this on both levels. The problem with the world today, right? The people of the world have been conditioned to be physical, to be mundane, to be carnal, and so that whenever there is a problem, they are seeking a material solution. And materiality is only going to get you so far. Revelations chapter 3, verse 18 has three things: the gold, the raiment, and the eye salve. Now, as it relates to the gold, it specifically says a couple of things. It says, A, to buy of me, and this verse is in red, so we know what this is talking about, that this is not just a mundane um, object here we're talking about obtaining. It represents something else as well. And it says, that which is tried in fire. Tried in fire basically means it is real, it has stood the test. Um, that thou mayest be rich. So, in a material sense, we see here that gold is representative of true wealth and value, real treasures, right? And that actually ties directly into the spiritual of it, which is the true treasures, right? We know that the Lord Yahweh maketh rich, and he had no sorrow with it. That's in our book. So we understand that true treasures and true blessings are those that come from the Creator Yahweh. So he's asking you to obtain these things from him. We know in the material sense that his true treasures, his true money are gold, which is the hob, and silver, which is kasef. Okay, and that is important. That is going to come up later. We're going to discuss some current things. Okay, and one of the other things that states that we should obtain are white raiments. Okay, now we see the word raiment sometimes, and we just garment, right? This is pretty much the same thing, clothing. And specifically, the Bible keeps mentioning white for a reason. This is symbolic. Not that you should not have a white garment on you, anyways, because it wouldn't hurt to have one that is white. Because if this has any um, literal importance, I would want to have that. If you want to look at it purely in the spiritual sense, that's fine. But to be safe, because some things in the Bible are literal, and the so called wise have taken it only to be a figurative thing when in fact the trick is on them that it is going to be something literal as well. So it would behoove us all to take this most literally and figuratively. So it says to obtain white raiments, and so we see that during the wedding supper, when the Son of Man appeared, when the angels of God Yahweh appeared, they appeared wearing white. We see in the end times prophecies when it talks about the host of heaven, the 144,000, the mixed multitude, white garments. Now we understand that this is something they all have in common. We know that there's a figurative meaning and a literal meaning. Figuratively speaking, it has something to do with the second part, which says that thou mayest be clothed, and that the shame of thy nakedness do not appear. When we go back to the garden, what made the nakedness of Adam and his wife Eve appear? What made it appear? Eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. In other words, sin, transgression of the law, commandments, judges. And so at this time it was a commandment, do not eat from the tree. And they broke that. So they were in sin, and it was sin that revealed shame to them. So clearly these white garments represent the abandonment of, or in the disconnect between you and sin, right? If we think of sin as things that dirty or sully our garments, then it becomes clear what this is about as well. To be spotless, blameless. And the last thing has to do with eye salve. And here, eye salve, it says that thou mayest see. We know that in the Bible, this analogy, right? This metaphor to see has to do with the ability to perceive, the ability to understand, the ability to find one's way, right? And I believe we talked about this in the past in a previous class for those who have been long-time listeners. We can tie this to Sodom and Gomorrah, where the citizens of Sodom and Gomorrah were blinded, right? This is a special word that is not used anywhere in the Bible except as a consequence of God Yahweh's intervention or that of his angels, right? This kind of blinding. And so it states that when they were blinded that they were unable to find the door. And if you think about that, it makes sense what that means. So the idea is that one has to be able to see. And this is actually backed up a little bit by this word eye salve. If you look at the Greek, it means like a paste or something that is placed over one's eyes so that your eyes are not tender, so you can keep them open to see. But specifically, it comes from a term which means to bind yourself onto, right? To fix, to join, to cleave onto someone. And we already know that there was a parable in the book of Matthew that actually demonstrated some of those same themes. What's interesting is this same chapter actually demonstrates all of the themes that we see here in Revelations 3, chapter 18. So, Matthew chapter 25. Let's go to Matthew chapter 25. Those of you who are familiar with this particular part of the Bible, what you'll find is that Matthew chapter 25 starts with the parable of the virgins. We understand that in this particular parable, the one thing that disconnected the wise virgins from the foolish was the presence of oil in their lamps versus the foolish not having any. So we know what the oil is. The oil is something you need to light a fire in the lamp so that you can see, right? The point of this whole thing was that those who had oil in their lamps to be able to see would go off with the bridegroom, right? They would go off and be joined on to the bridegroom. Um, we saw in the Exodus as well that there was a fire lit by night so the children of Israel could see their way out of Egypt. And there was a cloud, of course, by day. Remember, eye salve is for tender eyes so that you can continue to see. But it's basically something designed so that you can see, right? Um, and during the day, he was a cloud over the sun, so it was not so intense, so they can continue on. So in this case, it was something that allows one, permits one to be able to see, to carry on that walk. It allows you to be able to be joined onto the bridegroom. So we see where some of this, like all of this stuff, is actually in Matthew chapter 25. See, because Revelations chapter 3, it is not evident that this particular chapter has anything necessarily to do with end times. But verse 18 definitely relates to that. Because in Matthew chapter 25, when we get finished with the parable of the virgins, we actually get to another parable. And this parable is a parable of the servants, right? The servants who were given talents. And if you know what the talents are, talents is a certain weight of gold, right? And it talks about those who took those talents and multiplied them to have more. And then the one who did not, who was cast out. And it talks about those who have shall be given, and those that do have not shall be taken away. Um, so we see that there's a connection there with the gold as well. And as you go further down in Matthew chapter 25, and we know that this is talking about the entire, it talks about the kingdom of heaven, right? We already know that the kingdom of heaven is prophesied to return here on earth to supplant the kingdom of darkness that's currently residing. So we know this is talking about the end. If you go on further, it talks about one who is being fed, who's being given water for his thirst, one who is being clothed because he's naked. All three of these things that we see in Revelations 3:18 actually appear in Matthew chapter 25, which is talking about the end times, right? The clothing, the garments, we see that again in Daniel chapter 12. And we know without a shadow of a doubt that Daniel chapter 12 is talking about end times. It is evident. It is not a mystery or debate. So, how does this tie in to all that is going on? Well, family, Matthew chapter 3, verse 18 is something, like I said, we've gone over many times as a means of trying to encourage those who are listening, the family, to take some of your paper dollars and turn them into real money. And by real money, we mean gold and silver, because one of the things about paper dollars or digital dollars or dollars that are ones and zeros in a computer somewhere is that we have access to them at the touch of a finger. And we are sometimes tempted to take them and use them for unimportant and frivolous things, right? And the thing about it is, none of us is really lived through and experienced what is about to occur in the world and in this country. And it would behoove us to have a store of the universal currency or universal means of exchange. For a while, that's been the dollar, which, again, for a while has been worthless. It has not been backed by anything. But something recently happened that we had been talking about for a while. You'd heard us mention things about BRICS, 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 Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Well, what happened about a week ago was that their currency was unveiled, and multiple other countries were admitted into the BRICS economic bloc, and many countries applied for membership into the economic bloc. Now, this might not be sound important to you. I know most of you have not heard when this happened. I most definitely did not hear it if you were looking. I didn't hear it on the mainstream media. I don't really watch it, but I definitely didn't hear anything in the snippets that come from mainstream media stations. I mean, they're busy talking about Trump assassination attempts, um, what P Diddy's doing, J Lo, and every other thing is going on except for the announcement that is going to lead to probably the biggest geopolitical and global economic change that has existed in the lifetimes of anyone who is alive on this earth right now. This is the biggest change that has ever happened and is on this way. And of course, nobody has talked about it because we don't need people making runs on banks. We don't need people blowing the stock market up. It's not going to be pretty when it comes to realization, and they have no choice but to talk about it. By then, it will be too late. Gold right now is higher than it has ever been in history. Okay? Even then, it is still not unobtainable. You can still obtain it. And for those of you who are on a budget, silver might be a better option. There's talks that it will give a higher return percentage wise than gold may when that time gets here. But understand that many nations are now moving towards digital currencies. No matter what anybody tells you, Ron DeSantis here in Florida says certain things, Trump may say certain things, other politicians may say other things, but the fact of the matter is, history has proven that when the real movers and shakers say it is time, the politicians buckle and it's time. We are going to move into digital currencies around the world, whether we like it or not. It is up to you to decide what you are going to do in the meantime. Understand something. That is children of the Most High God Yahweh. It is important for us to understand things, right? To be perfect as our Father in heaven is perfect. And to understand, perfection means completion, to understand things from both a physical and a spiritual standpoint. We have to be ready on both fronts because we may not know necessarily how a particular prophecy is going to manifest itself. It would be good in the case where individual countries have digital currencies for use within their country, right? Where other countries globally do not trust this currency, this digital currency, because it could be drawn up with a few computer strokes. So to give real goods away for this digital currency, which means nothing in the context of their country, is crazy. Other countries have been purchasing and stockpiling gold and silver, and it's something some of you may not have known. Just the other day, riding down the street, I saw once again, for those who remember 2007, 2008, 2009, all the signs advertising beside the street, cash for gold and silver. I just saw it again, people standing out in the streets advertising cash for gold, cash for gold. So what I'm telling you is it might behoove you to have some of Yahweh's real money on hand, because the $34 an ounce that you spent on a silver ounce may return a lot more to you, right? And let's be clear about this. The paper dollars that you were giving away to get that silver, they are worthless. I'm just telling you, those paper dollars are worthless. And yet you go in and day out, going to your job that you don't like, for supervisors you do not like, in order to make these paper dollars so that you can pay your bills. Now, these same paper dollars right now you can exchange for different things such as food, clothing, and whatnot. You can pay your bills with these things. To exchange them for real money so that you can later exchange them for whatever local, and by local I mean within this country, whatever local currency is being offered, to be able to exchange them for far more of whatever digital local currency that is being offered, it might be wise. You may be able to take a what costs it, like I said, right now about $34 an ounce. It's probably going to cost you a little bit more if you were to buy it, but to take what costed you $34 now to exchange it down the line for $500, $1,000, that's a very good investment. There's not a savings account in the world, there's not a stock in the world right now that's going to give you that kind of return. And family, it's going to happen. It's prophesied to happen. It's prophesied that the money in Egypt, right, which is a country which is symbolic for bondage, right? In America, it initially it was the bondage of physical slaves, and now we do have people in bondage to debt, right? In a literal sense, people are in bondage to debts on bills that they owe, and they work day in and day out to pay these debts off, and they die with next to nothing. But also spiritually, people are in bondage to debt, right? Debt meaning sin. America allows you to come to this country and live out any type of wickedness that you want to live out. It is okay in America. It is like Sodom, right? That's why that country is called spiritually Egypt and Sodom, because it has both those characteristics that we're talked about in Revelations. We have wars going on in the world, and countries who have been blinded, who've been cursed by the Creator Yahweh um, with a stony heart, who've been blinded that they cannot see what is getting ready to befall them. They are attempting to drag every other country, specifically America, into a war to defend a lie that they are prophesized and destined, and that they have ownership of a land that in reality is not theirs, of an identity that is not theirs. They are perpetrating this lie until this day, and they are blackmailing the United States of America, because they know that the United States of America is complicit in the greatest cultural crimes the world has ever seen. And they know that right now, the United States of America is in ownership of the true children of Israel, right? They are holding them captive till this day. And so this is part of the reason why the greatest military country in the world, right? The greatest economic power in the world bows to the will of a little country that would not exist without their assistance. This is what's happening in the world, family. And for those of you who are in the military, those of you who have family in the military, um, you might want to consider, um, I don't know, a change in career, because I can tell you right now, family who are listening, that um, there's recently pictures released of Army Rangers who were killed attempting to carry out operations on Russian soil. I'm not talking about Ukrainian, on Russian soil. And there are people who have stated, right, and there's probably a lot of them who have signed non disclosure agreements. There are people who stated that their children who are not retired but active military have been killed overseas in Ukraine because they're over there fighting. Now, they're not telling you about this. They are, of course, lying and saying that they're just giving equipment and monetary assistance, but no. Understand that it is Yahweh's will. He's going to drag all nations who stood up against the children of Israel, the true children of Israel. He's going to drag all of them into the valley of Jehoshaphat. He's going to drag them into his Armageddon. And they will all pay the price for their trespass against his anointed. So, for those of you who are currently involved, like I said, pray about it and see where the Creator Yahweh wants you at. So, with this all being said, family, I do ask all of you to consider the things that I've said to you. I would consider, even if it means foregoing one or two eat outs a month for the time being. I know it doesn't seem like there's much time left, but you know, Yahweh has a way of holding back the flood waters until his children are ready, but don't tempt the Creator Yahweh. If it means not eating out once, twice, 3 times a month, to set a little extra aside so that you can begin to obtain gold, silver, so that when that time comes, you are not left empty. Okay? We see that as important to, that we are obviously in the world, but we should not be of the world. We should begin to clean our garments. We did this before the Feast of Tabernacles with the Day of Atonement. That Day of Atonement is a sign to us. It is a prototype for how we should ask for forgiveness, right? And the supplication that we should make in order to receive that forgiveness. We should all be in the process of cleaning our garments so that we are found meet to enter into the wedding supper, to walk amongst the host of heaven. And we should also make sure that we continue to pray for understanding so that we're able to see the handwriting on the wall, so that we're able to see the signs and we're able to act accordingly, so that we're not caught up in the flood of destruction like those who have given themselves up to materialism, right? That being said, family, I'm finished tonight. I thank all of you who were with us tonight, and I look forward to our next meeting. Shalom, family, and a Niyahab.